Good morning. Today we are going to be looking at the aim. How does human development impact natural systems? So right now we're moving on in chapter 1 to module 1. So in the textbook, which hopefully you will be getting soon, the textbook's broken up into chapters and then further broken down into modules. So we are in chapter 1 in unit 1, and we're looking at module 1. So module 1 is pretty basic, just introducing environmental science, some of today's objectives, define the field of environmental science. So what exactly is environmental science? Identify ways in which humans have altered and continue to alter our environment, and describe how human development impacts natural systems. Now, since this is the first module, but after the chapter opening case, the way you take notes is up to you. I will provide you with a guided notes handout if you would like to use at home, or if you prefer just writing your notes in the notebook, that's fine too. You could do a little bit of both, whatever is most helpful to you. All right, so what exactly is environmental science? It's a field of study that looks at interactions among human systems and those found in nature. So we're going to be looking at a lot of positive and negative interactions that humans have within the environment. So what are the 3 goals of environmental science? 1, to learn how life on Earth has survived and thrived. 2, to understand how we interact with the environment. And 3, to find ways to deal with environmental problems and live more sustainably. Throughout this whole year, we're going to be talking about environmental problems. We are going to talk about possible solutions. How do we live more sustainably? Sustainability is more towards the middle end of the curriculum, but throughout the year, we will be touching upon it. So what is the environment? The environment is the sum of all the conditions surrounding us that influence life. So if you look at this picture of the city, right? If you live in the city, that still is the environment. What are the components? What are the conditions that surround them that influence life? So if you look at this picture, some examples might be the water, right? So the water is going to influence this environment. The buildings, the people, all these conditions are going to influence the environment. Now, if you were in class today, we would do this quick turn and talk using this picture of the lion in the lion's environment. So you could do this at home. Take a look at this photo and answer the 2 questions. 1, observe the photograph and list the conditions that surround the lion. And then 2, you're going to choose one of these conditions and describe how the condition affects the lion. So I'll give you an example. The availability of the drinking water is a condition found in this photograph. So how would this water affect the lion? Well, the lion needs the water to drink. So if the water is contaminated, that can affect the lion. If there's a lack of water, there's a drought, that would affect the lion as well. So you could, like I said, do this quick activity at home, pick any condition surrounding the lion and how that would affect the lion. All right, what exactly is an ecosystem? It's a particular location on Earth with interacting biotic and abiotic components. So now we're going to refresh what exactly is a biotic and abiotic component. Biotic means living, abiotic is non-living. Like I said, module 1 is all introductory content. You probably learned about biotic and abiotic factors back in the living environment or even earth science. Biotic factors are living. So for example, if you look at this picture here, people, animals, plants. Abiotic factors are non-living, rocks, water, air, wind, temperature, and light. So in an ecosystem, you are going to have not only the biotic factors like animals interacting, but also with the abiotic factors. So for example, if we look here, this is like a coastal beach area in the picture. The animals that live in the intertidal zone are going to interact possibly with the rocks and the water within that intertidal zone. The temperature and abiotic factor is going to affect those organisms in the intertidal zone. The amount of light is going to affect those organisms in the in the intertidal zone. So both biotic and abiotic factors are going to be interacting with each other. Now we're going to move on to some other terms in the introduction of environmental science. What is an environmentalist? Now, if you notice in the picture here that shows some people standing up for the environment, you notice it ties in with the chapter Open and Case about fracking. So what exactly is an environmentalist? It's a person who's going to participate in environmentalism, a social movement to seek to protect the environment. So their goal is to protect the environment from being harmed through lobbying, activism, and education. Whether that be educating people about a certain environmental concern, lobbying, trying to get legislation passed for their cause, activism, all these different things falls under an environmentalist. So in this picture, they are trying to bring awareness to fracking and trying to prevent it from occurring. Bring awareness. So now we're going to be looking at some examples of environmentalism and conservationism. So let's take a look at George P. Marsh, which is America's first environmentalist. He published Man and Nature in 1864. He warned against environmental damage in the West. He is also partially responsible for the establishment of the forest reserves in 1873. Now, these slides, these are just some examples. You don't necessarily have to memorize these people. These are just some examples of what an environmentalist might do. 26th President Theodore Roosevelt, he's noted for his interest in conservation, so conserving nature and, for example, established the first wildlife refuge to protect the brown pelican, moved the Forest Service into the Department of Agriculture. Gifford Pinchot, the first head of the Forestry Service under Roosevelt, he used this philosophy that resources should be used for the greater good, for the greatest number of people for the longest time, which is a type of utilitarian conservation. So basically, you should preserve the resources. He's not saying you can't use the resources, but to preserve them so that future generations will be able to use those resources. Also, you have John Muir, who's the father of national parks. He founded the Sierra Club, one of the most important conservationist societies in the U.S. He assisted also in the establishment of Yosemite, Kings Canyon National Parks in California. And also Stephen Mather, he's a follower of John Muir, the first head of the National Park Service, established in 1916. Now, Rachel Carson, I'm really going to highlight here because I don't know if you've heard of her or read her book, Silent Spring. She was a biologist who published this famous book, Silent Spring, in 1962. She brought to light the harmful effects of DDT. So if you're thinking back into the AIM, what are some impacts that humans have, human development on the environment? Think about this, like DDT. DDT was an insecticide which has been since banned in the United States because of how harmful it is. It's pretty deadly to humans and most organisms. And they used to use it as an insecticide to kill insects. And it's very, very harmful and toxic chemicals. So they've since banned it. However, it's not banned throughout the whole world. Some parts of the world are still using DDT today. Now, Rachel Carson published this book. They didn't really take her too seriously back when it was, published. Because she's bringing to light the harmful effects. And at first, people didn't really want to take her seriously. It wasn't until later on that they saw the significance of what she was exposing. And we'll talk about that more later when we get to harmful chemicals later on in the year. All right, environmental studies. So environmental science, and now what exactly is environmental studies? It's a field of study that includes environmental science and additional subjects such as environmental, policy, economics, literature, and ethics. Now, if you were interested in going to the field of environmental science, it's not just the environmental scientist who's out in the field. It also gets into ethics, into law. There's a whole umbrella of different things that you can do in the field of environmental science. When I was in college, I actually took an environmental ethics course. So it's a huge branch of different topics that we will be talking about throughout the year. And the last part of the notes for today is talking about systems. All right. So this also ties in with the aim, how these interacting. So a system is any set of interacting components that influence one another by exchanging energy or materials. So if you look here, you have the natural world, you have the interactions between humans and the natural world. So everything, if you could take a minute and think about what are some human interactions, like how do we interact with the world on a daily basis? They could be both positive and negative. If you look back to the chapter opening case, human interactions with the environment, with the system, hydrofracking. Hydrofracking, it could have some, we learned, potentially negative effects like water contamination, causing earthquakes. It can cause animals to get sick and die. Huge humans can have on the environment with development. Also, with hydrofracking, cars, all the trucks that are required to ship the water, huge trucks of water just to do the fracking. So there's lots of components that influence each other. Also, when I talked about insecticides, right? Humans are interacting with the natural world by trying to prevent insects from eating their crops, so they use harmful insecticides. I'm sure you could think of a whole list of harmful things or interactions that humans have with these systems by exchanging energy or other types of materials. So now we're going to break down environmental systems a little bit more by looking at a diagram. So if you look at this different diagram, systems, these interacting components are on many different levels. You could have really small systems, and then you can have very large systems. So let's look at some examples. To a physiologist, if you see in this diagram, a cod is a system in itself. So the whole cod itself is a full system, right? All the interacting parts and components within the cod is considered a system. You look on another larger scale, to a marine biologist, the predator-prey relationships between the two fish species forms a system. So the two different species that are interacting with each other, the predator-prey, that's a larger scale system. And then even bigger, for an oceanographer, the system might consist of the ocean currents and their effects on fish populations. And then on another scale, you have a fisheries manager that's interested in a large system consisting of fish populations as well as human activities and laws. So systems come in many different categories. They could be very large systems or very small systems, like if we're looking at a specific organisms and the bodily systems within them, or the interactions between two species, or a whole dynamic system like a full ocean currents and fish populations. All right, so that's systems. If you take a look at the notes, what you could do now is you are going to try to provide your own example or create your own example of what another system might look like that's not related to the systems that we mentioned right here. And this is basically module 1. It's very simple. The next module, we're going to get more into detail, into some content, and also in the last part of chapter 1. So this is an introductory module. What I would like you to do now is, after you're done filling out your notes, go back into Google Classroom and please answer your AIM question that is posted for you. Okay, please answer it in complete sentences and try to provide evidence from this lecture, from your notes, right? So try to reference some examples. So also use some examples from your daily life. So can you think of ways that humans are going to affect the environment? All right, I look forward to reading your responses.